And these exist. You can look it up. It's Section 180, 181 of the Patent Law and the National Security Act. These national security orders happen all the time. So, but who's authorized? You think President Obama or the Senate Intelligence Committee knows that these goons are out there doing this stuff? No. And so here's this brilliant guy. I mean, he's an engineer and a physicist. So he develops this stuff. A bunch of guys come in who are badass folks, okay? And he's terrified. And so then all these years later, we get hold of him, and we say, look, okay, here's, some funds. Do this for us on a, Generation 1.0 version of this, something, and check with your intelligence folks. And they cleared him. About the time he was beginning to put this thing together, a former CIA director with a bunch of goons came down in 2010, this is 3 years ago, threatened him, threatened his family. One of the guys at the Naval Research Labs I've worked with for years who has some of this information, he was told, we will kill you, your wife, your children, and your grandchildren if you step out of line on this. So I don't think that, in terms of dealing with this, that you're going to be able to do it under any kind of where someone's trying to do it quietly, secretively. It's going to have to be in plain sight.
So what you're saying is that several people have tried to do this in the past.
Hundreds.
Every time they do it, they're threatened and stopped from doing it.
Right.
What specialized pieces of equipment would be necessary to produce this zero-point energy field thing?
Well, first of all, your computer and lights here are running on 110 or 220, all right, voltage. The voltages involved in these transdimensional physics is in the thousands to millions of volts, but at very low current. And so you have to have special analyzers and generators for that. So, I mean, there is a science to this, and we understand it very, very well, actually. But building up that lab, we looked into the equipment just as like $500,000 just to do that. And so what you have to do is... That
seems like nothing. If you're talking about $500,000 that can produce
No, that's
something...
just the equipment. No. There's no building, no personnel, no staff, no nothing. Just, the machine. So we estimate around $6 million to put a lab together, put these really brilliant people in it, get the right equipment, and build up these experiments and do real science. But the problem is you have people off on their own doing this that stumble across this phenomenon, and they get shut down or threatened or bought out. Then, you have the folks who will be, instead of threatened, they'll just be offered money. So a lot of people, Dr. Bearden tells this story of a man that had one of these generators, and he was testing it. It was a legitimate over-unity system. And then the guy disappeared. And the next time he saw the guy, he had a Ferrari and an Armani suit, and the guy never had a pot to pee in, as it were. And what we found with this is that a lot of times folks will just say, look, we're going to buy this. And a lot of people don't believe that happens, and they think that's a conspiracy theory. It isn't a conspiracy theory. And this is why the Federation of American Scientists, when they said, look, there are 5,135 or something like that patents that have been seized, most people don't know that those national security orders can happen outside of the patent process. So even if you're not going the patent route, they can go in there and just seize the damn thing. And what are you going to do?
They just seize it based on the idea that it's somehow or another a threat.
But, I mean, you can say it's national security, but as this one document from the Federation of American Scientists says, how could a solar voltaic system be a threat to the national security? It would be a threat to the special interests that are calling the shots. So the question becomes, who's really calling the shots on these sort of decisions? Is it in the interest of we the people? No. It's in the interest of folks who want to protect their cartels.
What is your take on guys who have come clean before, guys like Dr. Robert Lazar? He's the guy from Area 51 that came back and said that he was back engineering some alien craft, and very compelling to listen to, very interesting guy. But from what I understand, Dr. Stanton Friedman questioned him and, in fact, called him a fraud and said that some of his educational background was kind of made up.
Right. And here's the problem with any case where you hang it on one person like that. Is very risky, and that's why I've tried to resist that. I mean, when we started putting together the people who knew about the nuclear facilities with UFOs coming over, I didn't want one or two. I wanted half a dozen or a dozen. That's what we have. Now, I will say that the areas out in the Nellis Range, and nobody, by the way, calls it Area 51, but let's say that because
Groom Lake,
S4, S3, S12, and actually this National Reconnaissance Office document from the 1990s lists those facilities there. properly. Right.
They had to apply for additional land because people were getting so close that they could film footage of some of these crafts that they were experimenting on, and that's not bullshit. If you've ever seen, no one knows. Yeah, no one knows what those things were, but the way they were moving was extraordinary. They moved unlike any craft that we know. I would assume that if you look at what we're doing today in all different parts of the world with drones, especially these drones that have Hellfire missiles that can be fairly accurate when you're considering that they're being operated by someone halfway across the world.
Right.
That this probably has something to do with what they were working on back then when they're making these things fly around and do all these crazy turns and twists in the sky.
No, because the drones that are being reported are conventional propulsion systems, either jets or what we're talking about are things that are moving in a way that is outside the envelope of normal aerodynamic behavior. In other words, you cannot take something with a normal propeller or jet engine and accelerate it at 20,000 miles per hour and make a right-hand turn. And we have photos and images of these things doing this. So when you're doing that, that's going to, your brains are going to come out of your nose if you're a pilot, and even a conventional object is going to be blown to smithereens by the inertial forces of that kind of turn and deceleration.
But you're talking about things that have been seen in space.
No, I'm talking about things that
at Area 51.
At Area 51 and also all over the world that have been documented moving in this way. Those are moving, and I'm quoting actually General de Brouwer of the Belgian Air Force chief, who said this is outside the envelope of any conventional aerodynamic system.
I'm not questioning that, but what I am saying is that the things that I've seen as far as videos from Area 51 with these unidentified objects, whatever they were, moving across the sky, they weren't moving that fast. They were moving conventional speeds.
Oh, that's conventional. So that could be, but I'm talking about the things that I know that have been imaged out there, including a daytime object. There's actually more than people can imagine that's out there.
Okay, so there's enough of these things where if you look at, I believe Michio Kaku said 5% of all UFO sightings are completely unexplainable, defying the laws of physics, and may possibly be, in his opinion, something that we don't understand. It could be possibly.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. The other stuff, who cares?
What do you think they're doing here?
I think there are a number of things. Number one, I don't think it's new at all. I don't think there's a new phenomenon. There's enough material out there from ancient times that would indicate that these objects have been around since recorded history. I mentioned this earlier in the show. But secondly, I think at this stage of our evolution, these civilizations are rather concerned about our potential to destroy this planet and ourselves, but also the fact we're going into space. We have not become peaceful. And in our classified projects, we have things way beyond the International Space Station. So that we could become an existential threat to other planets, potentially. So I think that there is a concern about that. And I think that it's like when I went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where they had the blue room that Barry Goldwater Senator Goldwater tried to get in. And, the
Hangar
story.
18, yeah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that. But the thing is that...
That's on Hangar 18, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base?
Yeah, but
This is a different thing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base?
Right, it was called the Blue Room.
Is that where supposedly the Roswell wreckage was set?
Yeah, the Air Material Command, and then when I was there...
By the way, very compelling piece of evidence that there might have been something serious going on other than a weather balloon, the fact that two separate planes were used to send this wreckage because in case one of them went down.
Right.
It was so historically significant. I have that newspaper, the Roswell Daily Record. I have that page on my wall in my house, and I look at it all the time. It's a fascinating. I mean, it's essentially a press release by the military saying we've recovered a crashed disc
before they pulled it back.
Yeah. It's amazing because that's a big statement. I mean, you look at all the things they could have been wrong about, like it could have been something else, but the fact that they came out and said it's a crashed disc. That had never been done before. That really was one of the first.
I think some heads rolled over that press release, but because they had to pull it back.
Well, then they did that ridiculous dog and pony show where they brought out this shitty looking aluminum
Yeah,
foil.
it kind of looks like a Mylar thing. Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's quite hilarious. And the government, I mean, if you just look at the history of deception that the government has in dealing with the American public from the get-go, and whether it's with the Gulf of Tonkin incident or whether it's what happened with the Contras and the Sandinistas using
Right.
Taxpayer dollars, and black ops from selling cocaine in the ghettos of Los Angeles to fund rebel armies. If you just look, you got to know they're not telling the truth. Why would they tell the truth? If it was just a weather balloon, would they really put on this fucking dog and pony show where they'd have a general sit there, or was it Colonel, whoever it was, on his knees pointing out all the look at this, it's just wreckage.
Right. Well, that's what Colonel Corso said.
Yeah.
That it was. There's no question that this was something very legitimate. And in fact, when Barry Goldwater, Senator Goldwater, who had McCain's seat before John McCain took it in Arizona. I was at his home some years ago, and he had left the Senate, and he told me, he said, look, he says, it was a goddamn mistake then, it's a goddamn mistake now that this was ever kept secret. But he was an Air Force Reserve general, and he told me, Senator Goldwater said, look, I asked Curtis LeMay, General LeMay, to get me into the Blue Room at Wright-Patterson because I wanted to see this stuff, because he had heard reports from other pilots about UFO encounters. And Senator Goldwater told me that Curtis LeMay said, look, Barry, I can't even get into that area anymore. And if you ever ask me about this again, I will personally see that you are court-martialed out of the Air Force Reserves. This to a sitting senator. When I asked him, was Curtis LeMay serious? He said, yeah, like a heart attack. He says, I never brought it up again. And so the question becomes, when you have someone like Curtis LeMay, who admits to the fact that at a certain point even he was being kind of sidelined in terms of access of this information, and then threatens and says something like that to a sitting powerful U.S. senator. They were good friends. I mean, they were buddies. There's something going on here, and I've heard too many accounts like that from these sorts of people, and I think it's a time for people to understand that ruthless people are out there, and they do this sort of stuff. So, when what happened for the last 60 years continues to go on and on and on, the people who try to move into this, who are politicians, end up hitting the same buzzsaw that Senator Goldwater did.
These incredibly powerful, technologically advanced beings that come here from another planet and are concerned with the fact that we've developed the power to blow ourselves up, but yet lack the understanding, the intellect, or the spiritual capacity to recognize what the dangers and the repercussions of those actions would be. What are they? Is anybody communicating with them? Does anybody have a message from them? Is there anything that they say will be done if we keep fucking around? I mean, is there like any doctrine that they're trying to push on us?
Oh, I don't know if there's any doctrine. I think they're waiting for us to reach, you mentioned this physicist, a level 1 civilization, right, or a level 2, where we begin to behave in a halfway civilized way so that we could be quite open in our contact. But I think everyone always says, well, why don't they just land on the White House lawn or something? I said, yeah, right. Who's White House?
Right.
Humans
us,
are
because we rule.
Yeah, right.
This is America.
Right,
Fuck
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So maybe the White House in Bogota, Colombia. I think the question is turns the whole issue upside down. Mm-hmm. What do we have to do as a people and a civilization to be able to go into space and have open contact with these civilizations quite in an overt way as opposed to episodic way? Mm-hmm. And I think that requires us to begin to behave peacefully. It certainly requires that we not begin to weaponize space and that we stop doing things that are incredibly self-destructive. But the idea that they're going to land here and enforce, it's like us going to Afghanistan and think we're going to impose Jeffersonian democracy on a medieval feudal society. Really? That never has worked. So I think these civilizations are smart enough to know that that isn't the way this is going to happen. The humans, but the problem is that I kind of think we're running out of time to get some things right, things that should have been fixed 100 years ago, like living together peacefully, bringing out these technologies so we don't destroy the biosphere, eliminating poverty in the world. 48% of the public doesn't have pot to pee in. Literally, they don't have indoor plumbing on this planet. 48% of the 7 billion people. A lot of people don't know that. So, I think that until we begin to fix some of these larger problems, and the good news about all this is that it's fixable, and the means, the technologies to do that are already in existence. So if they're already in existence, and this science has been studied and suppressed and studied and suppressed for decades, it means that we as a people have to come together and say, all right, we're going to do this.